එදිනෙදා ඔබේ මුළු සිරුරටම රැකවරණයක්. සුදේශී කොඹ සබන්.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50 අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Making headlines tonight. From lockdown to locked up, former Minister RAJITHA SENARATNE surrenders to CID as bail quashed by Colombo Chief Magistrate. Cracking down on hate, Facebook issues apology for non-action during 2018's communal violence in Sri Lanka. What we want. TNA ready to join government if devolution on the table, says M.A. Sumandiran after talks with PM. Reasons to rejoice. Sri Lanka's recovery rate on the rise while government announces lifting of liquor ban. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday the 13th of May 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
69.97ට SMS කර රුපියල් මිලියන 3ක මුල්තැන්ගේ උපකරණ දිනාගෙන අවුරුද්දෙම 100 ටයිම් සේව් කරගන්න.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A warm welcome. This is your English news service on AdaDerana 24. I'm Indira Yamuatta. Sri Lanka's recovery percentage continues to improve as the tireless efforts of healthcare workers pay off. The recovery rate climbed once again to 42.7% as per latest reports, as week 9 of the pandemic has shown a gradual decline in new cases from the previous week's numbers. Meanwhile, as some countries report relapses among recovered patients, health authorities have begun testing recovered patients in former hotspots in the high-risk Colombo city for signs of a resurgence.
Out of the 20 patients identified in the country yesterday, 18 have been reported as Navy personnel. According to the epidemiology unit, one of the remaining duo is identified as an associate of a sailor and the other is a recent arrival from Dubai. Accordingly, the total number of COVID-19 infected persons in the country has increased to 893, with the 4 fresh cases reported today, with 502 active cases among them. Despite the detection of new cases, Sri Lanka's recovery rate continues to be on the rise, with 382 patients having returned to their regular lives after complete recoveries. With that, Sri Lanka's recovery rate has increased to its highest so far of 42.7%. Meanwhile, the number of sailors recovered from the virus has also risen to 62, with 10 naval personnel recovering yesterday alone. Nine weeks have passed since the detection of the first local case of coronavirus on the 11th of March. In the 9th week, which ended yesterday, only 121 people were diagnosed with COVID-19. Compared to the 8th week, this week has seen a drop of 20 patients. Meanwhile, blood samples were obtained from 49 more residents of Bandaranaike Mawatha in Keselwatta today. All of them are patients who recovered from COVID-19 and their blood samples were taken to determine a possible reactivation of the virus. Meanwhile, 129 more people quarantined at the Pampe Madu Quarantine Centre in Vaunia returned home today. They are relatives of Navy personnel quarantined after being exposed to the virus. Meanwhile, 16 family members of naval personnel left the Navy-operated quarantine centre in Anuradhapura today. A further 69 people also returned home today following quarantine at the headquarters of the 6th Gamunu Watch of the Sri Lanka Army in Aralakangvilla. At the Punani Quarantine Centre, nearly 100 persons left for home today, ending their quarantine period.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය පැතිරීම වළක්වන්න සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න.
And we'll return with some news just in after this short break. Do stay with us. Former MP Dr. RAJITHA SENARATNE was remanded until the 27th of this month by Colombo Chief Magistrate ZAHRAN after he surrendered to the CID and was produced in court this evening. This development came about after his previous bail application was quashed following the hearing of a previous application today filed by the Attorney General seeking to nullify the previous bail ruling. Earlier in the day, the High Court judge ruled that the defendant had violated provisions of the prison ordinance by receiving treatment in a private hospital, despite the act clearly stating that a detainee should be treated in state hospitals.
Former MP RAJITHA SENARATNE, who was previously granted bail by the Colombo Magistrates Court with regard to the controversial White Van press conference, was ordered to be produced before the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court today. Accordingly, the former MP has been brought before the Colombo Chief Magistrates Court by CID officers after surrendering to the CID this evening. The development came about following a ruling by Colombo High Court Judge Manjula Terekaratne to quash the granting of bail to the former parliamentarian by the Colombo Magistrates Court. In his ruling, the High Court judge ruled that the defendant had violated provisions in the prison's ordinance by receiving treatment in a private hospital, despite the act clearly stating that a detainee should be treated in state hospitals. This was arrived at after the judge had studied both the CID investigation and the actions of the defendant after he was named a respondent in the White Van case. The judge added that the magistrate had not issued an order to transfer the suspect from the private hospital to the Colombo National Hospital at the time, even though it was a legal requirement. The High Court judge stated that the suspect had produced a 2-year-old medical report to prove his health condition, and he had hence been admitted to the Lanka Hospital in Narayanpeta on the 26th of December, despite an arrest warrant being issued against him. In conclusion, the High Court judge ruled that an injustice had occurred and granted the necessary revision.
Facebook apologized for its failure to respond to almost a decade of warnings about misuse of its platform from groups within Sri Lanka leading up to the communal riots in year 2018 here in Sri Lanka. Now, the apology was made today following the release of an internal assessment carried out by a human rights consultancy group that found that contents shared on the platform, which Facebook did not take action against, may have led to the offline violence.
Following the release of an internal human rights impact assessment carried out on the company's operations in Sri Lanka, social media giant Facebook has issued an apology for its lack of action in preventing communal violence targeting the Muslim community in the country 2 years ago. Riots broke out in early 2018 with severe anti-Muslim hysteria whipped up on social media that resulted in the authorities blocking access to Facebook and declaring a state of emergency. The end result of the riots was 3 dead and 20 others injured, while mosques and scores of Muslim-owned businesses were burnt to the ground. Following this, the company commissioned a probe into any part it may have played in allowing incendiary content on its platform to foment hate, which led to the violence and death. The human rights consultancy group Facebook hired to carry out the investigation had found that content shared on the company's platform may have led to offline violence. The consultancy company had also found that civil society groups had attempted to engage the company on related issues as far back as 2009. In a statement to Bloomberg News, Facebook said that it deplored the misuse of its platform and it recognizes and apologizes for the very real human rights impact that resulted. The company added that it had taken a number of steps in the last 2 years to address the issue and better protect human rights, including the hiring of Sinhala-speaking staff, implementing technology that automatically detects signs of hate speech and keeps abusive content from spreading, and trying to deepen relationships with local civil society groups. The statement also revealed that the company has taken steps to reduce the distribution of frequently reshared messages often associated with clickbait and misinformation.
නිෂ්පාදිත දිනය කවදත් අලුත් වටවල තේ අරගන්න.
වටවල තේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ තේ එක.
Well, pertaining to this apology by Facebook and the possible role that this social media platform may have played in Sri Lanka's communal violence back in 2018, we'd like to speak to digital media analyst Mr. Nalaka Gunawardena, who I am connecting live on video conferencing. Mr. Gunawardena, thank you for joining us. Now, this human rights assessment report by Facebook this morning about 2018, when is this dated? Give us an update on the key findings of this report to begin with.
Okay, it is a significant outcome of a assessment carried out in August and September of 2018. As you just heard, it was carried out by an independent human rights consultancy company called Article One. They did for Sri Lanka as well as for Indonesia, and the objective was to find out how the use of Facebook is impacting societies in our two countries, and it looked at both the human rights benefits as well as negative impacts. And on the plus side, and this is also, I think, significant. On the plus side, Facebook has played a key role in enabling marginalized voices in society who did not and do not have easy access to the mainstream media. It has given a platform for civil society and others to mobilize. So all that is acknowledged. But on the negative side, the report has documented the impacts on five categories in particular. The impacts on women, the impacts on children, on religious minorities, on sexual minorities or the LGBTQ community,
Right.
as well as human rights defenders. And in each of these specific groups that the assessment looks at, it has found that there have been many unintended consequences of this global platform and when it comes to local use. And this is what it's drawing the attention of the users as well as their company's management, that it needs to be a lot more tuned in on how the platform is being used by over 2 billion users who are now among the Facebook community.
Now, Facebook has repeatedly said that they're improving their tools on AI technology. But how effective has this social media platform been in dealing with local languages, Sinhalese and Tamil, where most of these hate speech, misinformation, disinformation is spread? So what is the effective measure here?
That is indeed the key question. Now, Facebook was summoned to key parliaments in the US, in the UK, and was interrogated. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder himself, and the senior executives were interrogated by legislators on how Facebook is being responsive and responsible. And one of the points that Zuckerberg kept saying is, oh, we are deploying state-of-the-art artificial intelligence that can automatically detect and help remove most of the hate speech and disinformation. Now, that may well be advanced for key international languages like English, French, Spanish. But when it comes to our languages, Sinhala, Tamil, and Burmese and other languages, that capability is nowhere near optimal. It is still very rudimentary, and to rely on automated screening systems is certainly not a viable option for the moment. So what the company does then is to rely on human content monitors. Again, the company has not been disclosing how many Sinhala and Tamil language content monitors it has. It didn't have any excuse me. It didn't have any until a couple of years ago. And in response to the March 2018 violence, they said they have increased, but they still would not disclose how many is on their Sinhala and Tamil content moderation teams. So what we see is that the company is certainly responding to the allegations and the huge negative publicity that was created not only in Sri Lanka but also by the violence in Myanmar. But is this enough? Is this anywhere proportionate to the huge and rising impact that the platform is having in our countries?
Back in 2018, Mr. Gunawardena, the government locked out Facebook for a week, and even during the Easter attacks, we saw this, how they reacted. But the reaction and the apology of
That's something the government should certainly study. The government should study the full human rights impact assessment as well as the Facebook company's response. Facebook is certainly trying to clean up its act and improve its responsibility, belatedly perhaps, but better late than never. Now, for government, both the previous government as well as this government, the crude measure is to block the whole platform, as was done 4 times after the Easter Sunday attacks and once for several days after the March 2018 violence. But that is not the right way to respond, because like all digital technologies, Facebook is a platform that brings many benefits as well as some negative impacts. There is the good, there is the bad, and there is the ugly. So in such a mixed bag, how do we manage this locally in terms of policy and regulatory response, in terms of digital literacy, and also how do we hold the company accountable to be enforcing its own rules, which are known as community standards. Now, every Facebook user signs up and agrees to abide by what are known as community standards.
Right.
And yet, when it comes to violations and breaches in Sinhala and Tamil users, the company has not been able to adequately monitor. So this is the gap. This is a huge gap that Facebook is trying to plug, and it has appointed more content moderators, it has appointed a policy manager for Sri Lanka, and it is also investing in artificial intelligence, we are told, for better language capabilities in Sinhala and Tamil. But these are medium to long-term measures. But in the short term, I think all of us, users, the state, and the company have a responsibility to be vigilant, to find and rapid respond to the early warnings of any abusers scaling up, whether it's violence, whether it is election manipulation, whether it is disinformation.
Now, some say that Facebook's system of such apologies are a symptom of a profound crisis of accountability. What are your thoughts, very quickly, before we wrap up this discussion?
Facebook has been less than accountable. Certainly outside the United States, it has not been sufficiently accountable to other users in all parts of the world. And this is part of the problem. It is still thinking in terms of the accountability to the country of registration and to the First Amendment in the US, which safeguards freedom of speech. But what it instead should move to is to conform to the international human rights legal framework, which is what the global community is expected to abide by. And accountability stems from adopting a more robust and more vigilant human rights framework and practice.
Thank you very much for your time. I think it's time we move on to a news alert just in. Thank you for your time here.
This is a news alert from AdaDerana 24.
අයිබෝන් නිකුත් ජනාධිපතිවරණ සමයේ පැවැත් වූ ආන්දෝලනාත්මක සුදුවෑන් මාධ්‍ය සාකච්ඡාවේ නඩු විභාගයට අදාළව හිටපු අමාත්‍ය රාජිත සේනාරත්න මහතා මැයි මාස 27 වනදා දක්වා රක්ෂිත බන්ධනාගාරගත කෙරුණා. අප දැන් යොමු වනවා කොළඹ ප්‍රධාන මහේස්ත්‍රාත් අධිකරණයේ සජීව දර්ශන වෙත. දිවරි
Yes, Chatra, former MP Dr. Rajitha Senaratne, who surrendered to the CID, was remanded until the 27th of this month, and we have visuals from the premises right now for you. We're covering the ongoing developments of former MP Dr. Rajitha Senaratne, who was ordered to be remanded until the 27th of this month by Colombo Chief Magistrate Lanka Jayaratne after he surrendered to the CID and was produced in court this evening.
ඉකුත් ජනාධිපතිවරණ සමයේ පැවැත් වූ ආන්දෝලනාත්මක සුදුවෑන් මාධ්‍ය සාකච්ඡාවේ නඩු විභාගයට අදාළව හිටපු අමාත්‍ය රාජිත සේනාරත්න මහතා මෙලෙස මැයි මාස 27 වනදා දක්වා රක්ෂිත බන්ධනාගාරගත කෙරුණා. මීට සුළු වේලාවකට පෙර කොළඹ ප්‍රධාන මහේස්ත්‍රාත් ලංකා ජයරත්න මෙනවි විසින් මෙම නියෝගය ලබා දුන්නා. මෙම නඩුව සම්බන්ධයෙන් කොළඹ මහේස්ත්‍රාත් අධිකරණය මින් පෙර රාජිත සෙනාරත්න මහතාට ඇප ලබා දෙමින් නියම කර තිබූ අතර එම නියෝගයට එරෙහිව නීතිපතිවරයා විසින් කොළඹ මහාධිකරණය හමුවේ ගොනු කර තිබූ ප්‍රතිශෝධන පෙත්සම අද විභාගයට ගැනුණා. එහි තීන්දුව ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරමින් මහාධිකරණ මිනිසුරුවරයා ප්‍රකාශ කළේ එම ඇප නියෝගය අවලංගු කරන බවයි. ඒ අනුව අද පස්වරුවේ රාජිත සෙනාරත්න මහතා අපරාධ පරීක්ෂණ දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවට බහර වුණු අතර සැකකරු කොළඹ ප්‍රධාන මහේස්ත්‍රාත්වරිය හමුවට ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමෙන් පසු ඇය නියෝග කළේ රාජිත සෙනාරත්න මහතා මැයි මාස 27 වනදා දක්වා රක්ෂිත බන්ධනාගාරගත කිරීමටයි.
This is a news alert from AdaDerana 24.
Back in English news, the Colombo Fort Magistrate has recorded statements from 2 minors who had allegedly attended lectures held by Easter attack mastermind ZAHRAN Hashim and the National Tawhid Jamaat, which included extremist content and instructions on the use of firearms.
Following the recent detection of several training centers and locations used for conducting lectures by Easter Sunday attacker ZAHRAN Hashim and his co-conspirators in the past few weeks, officials of the Criminal Investigation Department have initiated a process to identify all attendees. Some of the locations were determined to have been used for conducting weapons training, in addition to the propagation of extremist beliefs. With that, the parents of 2 minors who had attended such lectures made a request to the Criminal Investigation Department of their need to submit statements on the subject, and the request was forwarded to the court by the CID. Accordingly, the 2 boys aged 8 and 14 years appeared before the Colombo Fort Magistrate Ranga Disanayaka through private lawyers, and their statements were recorded for 4 hours with the assistance of a Tamil translator. Meanwhile, the CID stated that officers have so far recorded statements from 16 boys who had allegedly participated in such extremist lectures. However, the CID said that an organized group had previously obtained affidavits from the parents of 14 of the boys.
We have more news coming your way after this short break. Do stay with us. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has instructed officials to commence work on the compilation of a digital database of all Sri Lankans that will entail the issuing of new unique digital identity cards containing detailed biodata that will link all activities including income tax and voting.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today reviewed the current status of the proposed unique digital identity card, which will be issued to members of the public that will contain vital data of all citizens. With the new identity card system, a citizen's biodata could be viewed using a physical method as well as online. The new identity card will store highly accurate data comprising of information required by all government departments and agencies. It will include information required to be furnished not only for obtaining passports and driving licenses, but also for pension-related purposes, obtaining of samurdhi allowances, income tax information, and voting. The idea of a digital identity card was first mooted by the President during his tenure as the country's Secretary of Defence, with the initial groundwork being prepared in 2012. The new identity card will be prepared by a committee of experts under the direction of the Information and Communication Technology Agency and under the supervision of a presidential task force. The President instructed officials to take steps to issue the new identity card to every citizen as soon as possible.
Public and private sector staff for the third day commuted to work using public transportation services, with most passengers saying following the health and safety practices expected of them. However, among some members of the public, bad habits seem to be a bit too difficult to get rid of, as our cameras spotted passengers openly flouting social distancing and personal safety protocols.
Regular activities continued almost back to normal for the third day as employees of both private and public sector reported to work using public transport. Railways island-wide worked to provide transport to employees of both sectors working in Colombo as usual, with passengers seen adhering to the safety protocols in place. However, in Beliata, a tense situation was witnessed at the railway station between railway officers and passengers who hadn't used the prior booking system and were hence not able to find their way to their workplaces. In the meantime, buses belonging to the Sri Lanka Transport Board were also deployed along the roads. Furthermore, private buses were also seen providing transport services. Meanwhile, passengers in 23 districts except Colombo and Gampa were allowed to board buses according to the number of seats available. However, passengers at the SLTB bus stand in Colombo Fort were seen ignoring safety protocols. Police in some areas were seen enforcing passenger seating according to social distancing guidelines. In the meantime, public health inspectors in some areas carried out body temperature checks on passengers using public bus transportation. As witnessed in the past 2 days, some passengers were still inconvenienced due to a lack of buses plying some routes. In the meantime, police continued to conduct inspections on vehicles travelling the main roads leading into and through the city. Restaurants were allowed to open today, however strict instructions were issued relating to the serving of customers for takeout orders only. Restaurant operators have been instructed to not allow customers to dine in at the premises. Furthermore, shops and beauty parlours also remained open. In other news, the Department of Excise has announced that taverns and bars in non-curfew areas will be permitted to open with certain restrictions from today. In addition, liquor stores at supermarkets in the Colombo and Gampa districts, where the curfew remains in effect, will also be allowed to resume sales. Following this announcement, large queues were seen outside liquor shops. Meanwhile, the curfew, which was reimposed for the 23 districts at 8 p.m. this evening, will be lifted again at 5 a.m. tomorrow, except in the Colombo and Gampa districts. According to the national ID card system, people with 7 or 8 as the last digit of their national ID cards will be permitted to move about tomorrow in order to restock essential supplies. However, regulations restricting the use of personal vehicles for non-essential purposes will remain in place.
Former Jaffna District TNA parliamentarian M.A. Sumandaran told media today that his party agrees with the President's opinion on the need for constitutional amendments. He added that his party stands ready to join the government provided that a proper system for power devolution is provided for in any changes.
A discussion was held between Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and former Tamil National Alliance parliamentarian M.A. Sumandaran last night at the Prime Minister's official residence at Vijayarama Mawatha.
නව පාර්ලිමේන්තුවක් පිටුවාට පස්සේ අලුත් ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් හදන්න ඕනේ කියන මතය ජනාධිපතිතුමා මේ වර්ෂයේ ජනවාරි මාසයේ 3 වෙනිදා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කතා වෙනුත් කිව්වා. අපේ අදහසත් ඒකමයි. නව ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාව මේ රටට ඕනේ. එතන දමන ජාතික ප්‍රශ්නයටත් විසඳීමක් ගෙන්න ගන්න ඕනේ කියලා මතේ ඉන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒක ගැනත් මම කතා කරා. බලය හරි ආකාරයට බෙදන්න ඕනේ කියන මතේ අපි ඉන්නේ. ඒක ඊටු කරාම අපි ඉන්පසුව ආණ්ඩුවත් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා කටයුතු කරන්නට
Meanwhile, the Jaffna police took action to remove an effigy of the former Jaffna district parliamentarian, which had been installed near the Nallur Kovil in Jaffna that carried a defamatory slogan. The effigy contained a placard that read, "I am a traitor of the Tamil nation." Jaffna police have initiated an investigation into the incident to apprehend the perpetrators.
Now, the Defence Ministry has responded to claims in print and electronic media of an alleged cover-up by the Sri Lankan Navy to conceal the number of infected naval personnel. In the statement released today, Defence Secretary Major General Kamal Gunaratne said that the Sri Lankan Navy were, as well as other arms of the military, were following a strict, transparent process of disseminating information on its personnel and its testing process pertaining to COVID-19 to relevant authorities.
The Defence Ministry has issued a statement refuting allegations that the Sri Lankan Navy is concealing vital information from health authorities on the coronavirus outbreak among its cadre. The statement, issued by the Defence Ministry's Media Director Shanika Sriyananda, says that the Navy had at the very inception of the outbreak on the 22nd of April had expanded PCR tests for all naval personnel at its Valisara Naval Complex. It added that Defence Secretary Major General Gunaratne had categorically rejected such claims in electronic and print media, adding that the Tri-Forces, including the Sri Lankan Navy, were maintaining a strict, transparent process of disseminating information on its personnel and its testing processes. The statement added that as contact tracing continues, any personnel identified were being treated at hospitals. The Navy, it said, had taken all precautionary measures to contain the virus spread on the instructions of Deputy Director General of Health Services Dr. Paba Paliyavadana, a group of officers, and a specialist in infectious diseases, Dr. Tilanga Patirana. The Navy had also sought assistance from the Regional Directorate of Health for the Gampar district, in addition to having stationed government-trained Sri Lanka Navy public health inspectors to oversee the process. The Defence Secretary added that the Navy has been following all necessary communication guidelines regarding its infected sailors and its testing processes.
Following the dispatch of a medical team by the Cuban government to aid Sri Lankan apparel workers in Haiti on a request by the Sri Lankan government, Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena met with the Cuban ambassador last evening, where he expressed his deepest gratitude for the gesture. With over 50 Sri Lankans currently in Haiti unable to access medical facilities, the 5-member Cuban medical team arrived in the country on the 7th of May and began providing regular health screening and primary care for those in need.
Minister of Foreign Relations Dinesh Gunawardena has extended the Sri Lankan government's deepest appreciation to the Cuban government for the recent dispatch of a medical team to assist Sri Lankan apparel sector workers in Haiti. The foreign minister conveyed these sentiments during a meeting with the Cuban ambassador in Sri Lanka, Joana Elena Ramos Rodriguez, yesterday at the Foreign Ministry. Cuba's government sent a 5-member medical team on the express request of the Sri Lankan government to support the over 50 apparel sector employees located in Haiti. The medical team, which arrived in Haiti on 7th May, advised the Sri Lankan employees on best practices to be adopted for the prevention of COVID-19, regular health screenings, and primary care for those in need. The foreign minister also discussed COVID-19 containment measures adopted by Sri Lanka and Cuba, assistance sought by the Sri Lankan government in obtaining diagnostic medical items from the Cuban government, as well as future strategies for economic cooperation. Ambassador Rodriguez commended the Sri Lankan government for the successful COVID-19 containment measures implemented through timely and centralized action, making use of the effective health system prevalent in the country. The discussions also focused on existing cooperation between Sri Lanka and Cuba in the bilateral and multilateral spheres on issues of relevance.
Now recovering from 2 days of initial shock, Sri Lankan stocks rebounded 2.81% at close today, ending 2 days of losses backed by foreign buying. Now the index followed an upward trend before coming to an all-day high mid-morning, after which it showed sideways movement until market close. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks advanced 2.59% at close. And that's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.